A lone explorer once stood in a derelict asylum and heard a disembodied whisper. That spectral echo is a key to the past. These are not just ghost stories. They are the emotional and historical imprints left on abandoned places across the globe, the true specters of forgotten lives and events. What memories do these silent walls hold? We are about to journey to the world's most eerie and historically rich forsaken locations. You will discover the chilling truths behind places where time itself seems to have fractured. Why did an entire city vanish overnight? What force keeps a castle's terrible secret locked away? By the end of this tour, you will see history not as dusty facts, but as a living, breathing presence in the ruins we leave behind. What do you believe is the most powerful emotion a place can hold onto forever? Is a specter always a ghost, or can it be something far more profound? These phenomena are often not apparitions at all, but the powerful emotional residue of the past. Think of it as an echo of intense human experience, a moment of profound trauma, sudden joy, or overwhelming turmoil that somehow becomes etched into the very fabric of a location. This is not merely a supernatural fancy. Some parapsychologists reference what is called the stone tape theory. It proposes that certain materials, like the stone of an old castle or the wood of a forgotten house, can act like a recording device, absorbing and storing the powerful emotional energy of events and then replaying them under the right conditions. This helps explain the two primary types of hauntings we hear about. A residual haunting is like a broken record, a fragment of energy replaying the same moment over and over, completely unaware of any present-day observers. Then there is the intelligent haunting, which suggests a conscious, interactive presence, a spirit that can perceive and perhaps even respond to the living. But what makes one place feel haunted while another does not? It often boils down to three key ingredients. The first is emotional resonance, a location where people experienced extreme, concentrated feelings, whether love or terror, holds onto that energy. The second is historical significance. A site of a great tragedy or a pivotal event carries a collective weight. The third is the architectural atmosphere itself. Creaking floors, shadowy corridors, and decaying grandeur all prime our minds to feel the past more acutely. Consider an old battlefield, silent now for centuries. Visitors sometimes report hearing the faint, distant sounds of conflict, the clash of steel, or the ghostly roar of a charge. This is a classic residual haunting, a recording of a massive, tragic event imprinted upon the land itself. Have you ever walked into a very old building and been struck by a sudden, unexplained chill or a wave of profound sadness? You were likely feeling the faint, lingering echo of a story long forgotten, a true specter of the past. A dense, unnatural silence hangs over the waters of the Venetian lagoon. Just off the main tourist routes lies Poveglia Island, a place so shrouded in sorrow that even the local fishermen steer their boats clear of its shores. For centuries, this small island has served as a dumping ground for human misery. Its story begins during the darkest days of the Black Death, when it was converted into a massive lazaretto, a plague quarantine station. Ships would arrive carrying the sick and the dying, but few ever left. Historical records suggest that at the height of the outbreak, thousands of people were essentially left here to perish, their bodies burned in massive pyres or buried in pits so vast the very soil of the island is composed of human ash. One historian specializing in the period described it as a place of pure terminal exile, where hope was the first thing to die. This legacy of suffering only deepened in the 20th century, when the island's buildings were repurposed into a mental asylum. It is here that the most chilling legend took root, the story of a doctor who performed horrific experiments on his patients, driven by a mad desire to understand the nature of death itself. The story goes that he was eventually driven insane by the vengeful ghosts of his victims, leading him to throw himself from the institution's tall bell tower. To this day, visitors and paranormal investigators claim that on perfectly calm, windless nights, they can hear the clear, mournful toll of that same bell, a sound with no physical source. The phenomena reported are visceral and deeply unsettling. Explorers speak of the sudden, gut-wrenching smell of decay where none should exist, of shadowy figures darting at the edge of vision, and most consistently, of an overwhelming, palpable sense of despair that clings to the air like a cold mist. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came from a documentary crew that managed to secure rare permission to investigate. In a segment of footage from a long-abandoned ward, their sensitive audio equipment captured a clear electronic voice phenomenon, a disembodied whisper pleading for help in Italian. This was not the random static of a faulty recorder, but a distinct, intelligent response to their presence. Encounters like this force us to ask a difficult question. What are the ethical lines we cross when we step into places that are, in essence, open graves, sites of almost unimaginable human suffering? Are we respectful observers, or are we unintentionally disturbing a sacred, if tragic, peace? The layered agony of Poveglia is a profound example of a location saturated with the specters of its past, a haunting that feels less like a ghost story and more like a wound in the world. From this island of collective sorrow, our journey takes us to a fortress built not for the sick, but for the elite, a place where a single, terrible secret was sealed away for eternity. Rising from the sea like a monstrous concrete warship, Hashima Island presents a silhouette of pure, brutalist industry. This was not always a ghost town. For nearly a century, it was a pulsating heart of Japan's industrial revolution, a densely packed coal mining facility run by Mitsubishi where thousands of workers and their entire families lived and labored on a rock barely a kilometer long. They built up, not out, creating the world's first high-rise concrete apartment blocks, a labyrinth of tiny homes, schools, and shops squeezed onto every available inch. Today, it stands perfectly frozen in the 1970s, the moment the coal ran out and everyone simply left. As one urban explorer who has documented the island notes, walking through Hashima is like stepping into a photograph where time has stopped. Meals are still on tables, personal belongings gather dust in cramped closets, and children's toys litter the floors of the abandoned school. But this perfectly preserved time capsule holds a much darker energy. The island's reputation for being haunted is deeply intertwined with its grim history, particularly the period during World War II, when Korean prisoners of war and Chinese conscripts were forced into brutal labor in the undersea mines under horrific conditions. This legacy of suffering seems to have seeped into the very concrete. Visitors and film crews report consistent, chilling phenomena. The sound of children's laughter is often heard echoing from the empty schoolyard, a joyous noise that becomes deeply unsettling in the pervasive silence. Deep within the decaying network of tunnels and infrastructure, shadowy apparitions of miners, their forms hunched and weary, have been seen shuffling through the perpetual gloom. One particularly compelling account comes from a photographer who was capturing the stark decay of a central stairwell. He felt a sudden, sharp, and unmistakable shove on his back, an invisible force that nearly sent him tumbling down the crumbling steps. He was completely alone. This rapid decay, accelerated by salt winds and the political controversy surrounding Japan's acknowledgement of its wartime forced labor practices, creates a powerful dissonance. The island is both a UNESCO World Heritage Site, celebrated for its industrial archaeology, and a memorial to profound human suffering. It forces us to ask, what are the true ghosts of industry and progress? Are they the spirits of those who toiled and died here, or are they the lingering consequences of ambition built on the backs of forgotten people? The specters of Hashima are not just echoes of individual lives, but the unresolved weight of a nation's complex history. From this island of industrial ghosts, we now travel to a place of intense spiritual unrest, where faith itself seems to have left a permanent scar on the landscape. High in the arid hills of Rajasthan, the massive gates of Bhangarh fort stand open to an empty city. According to local legend, this profound emptiness is the result of a single, powerful curse. The story begins in the 17th century with a holy ascetic known as Baba Balaknath, who had given his permission for the fort to be built on one strict condition. His own secluded meditation spot, a simple patch of land, must never be touched by the shadow of the fort's walls. For a time, the rulers respected this. But a subsequent prince, driven by ambition or perhaps simple hubris, added to the structure until one day, a rooftop finally cast its long shadow over the sage sanctuary. Enraged, the holy man pronounced a terrible fate upon the entire city, decreeing that it would be abandoned and that no roof would ever again offer shelter to its inhabitants. A folklore scholar from the region explains that this core legend is often intertwined with a more tragic tale of a beautiful princess and a sorcerer who fell desperately in love with her. When his magical attempts to win her affection were discovered and thwarted, he, too, is said to have laid a dying curse upon the land. The prosperous city did not fall to invaders, but was slowly, mysteriously emptied, its grand palaces and bustling markets left to the desert winds. Today, the Archaeological Survey of India has taken the extraordinary step of posting an official sign at the entrance, explicitly forbidding anyone from remaining within the fort's boundaries between sunset and sunrise. This makes Bhangarh one of the very few places on Earth legally recognized as haunted. The phenomena reported here are not of violence but of a lingering, spectral society. Visitors during the day speak of hearing the faint, melodic strains of classical music and the jingling of gongrus, the ankle bells of dancers, drifting from the ruins of the central courtyard. The air in certain chambers will suddenly become heavy with the distinct, sweet fragrance of perfumes and incense, scents that have no place in the dusty environment. Most consistently, people report the unnerving, persistent sensation of being watched by countless unseen eyes. One tourist's account has become a modern part of the fort's lore. He insisted that his high-end digital camera, which worked perfectly everywhere else, repeatedly and inexplicably failed the moment he passed through the main gate. The battery would drain instantly, the lens would refuse to focus, and the few pictures he did manage to take appeared as nothing but foggy gray static. Later, upon reviewing his gear at his hotel, everything functioned flawlessly once more. This raises a profound question about the nature of such places. Does the sheer, concentrated power of a centuries-old belief, of a story told and retold by generations, somehow create its own reality? Can a curse become a self-fulfilling prophecy, woven into the stones by the collective faith of millions? The mystical aura of Bhangarh, a monument to broken spiritual covenants, contrasts sharply with our next destination, a chilling monument to modern folly and political arrogance. The colorful, decaying pods of Sanzhi stand like a forgotten future on the coastline of Taiwan. These futuristic, saucer-shaped structures were never the luxury vacation paradise they were meant to be. Conceived in the late 1980s, this resort was a vision of opulence, a collection of circular, UFO-like homes intended for the wealthy elite. But the project was plagued from the start by a series of mysterious and fatal construction accidents, followed by a catastrophic financial collapse that left the entire complex abandoned before a single guest could check in. An architect who has studied the site described it as a textbook case of failed utopian design, a place that now exists primarily in the realm of ruin porn, its aesthetic appeal born entirely from its spectacular failure. The rumors began almost immediately, whispers that the land was cursed and that the spirits of workers who died during construction now roamed the vacant pods. Urban legends grew, suggesting the site was built on an ancient burial ground, or that a vengeful spirit was responsible for the string of bankruptcies that doomed the project. Environmental concerns about asbestos and structural instability only added to its forbidden aura, making it a magnet for daring explorers and paranormal investigators. These investigators reported strange, localized phenomena that defied explanation. They documented anomalous cold spots in the middle of sun-drenched rooms, and their sophisticated electronic equipment would fail without warning, only to function perfectly again once they left the property. Some claim to have captured fleeting images of shadowy figures peering from the curved, shattered windows of the brightly colored pods. What truly haunts Sanzhi, however, feels less like a traditional ghost and more like the specter of failed ambition itself. It is a monument to broken dreams and financial ruin, a place where the bright, optimistic vision of the future curdled into a ghost story. These pods are not haunted by kings or soldiers, but by the very modern ghosts of bankruptcy and misplaced hope. When you look at these ruins, what do you see? The ghosts of lost workers or the chilling echo of a dream that never was? Leaving this modern ruin, we venture to a place frozen in a moment of terror. The silence in Pripyat is a physical weight, a dense blanket of absence smothering a city that was once alive with 50,000 souls. Built as a shining, modern home for the workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant and their families, it was a model Soviet utopia, complete with a cultural palace, a fairground, and schools filled with children. Then, in a single day in April 1986, it was all gone. The evacuation order came with terrifying urgency, giving residents mere hours to gather a handful of belongings before boarding buses, told they would return in 3 days. They never did. A former resident once recalled the sheer chaos, describing a line of buses stretching to the horizon and the chilling sight of a city full of life simply stopping, with meals left on tables and toys abandoned in playgrounds. The specters that haunt Pripyat are not the ghosts of individuals, but the overwhelming presence of life interrupted. It is a haunting of pure absence, a city frozen in the moment it was severed from its people. Guides who lead sanctioned tours through the crumbling apartment blocks and overgrown central square consistently report the same eerie phenomena. The wind seems to carry the phantom laughter of children from the rusting Ferris wheel, a ride that was scheduled to open for May Day celebrations just days after the disaster. Dark, fleeting shadows are often seen in the skeletal windows of the schools, as if a class is still in session. One journalist documented a particularly chilling moment inside a kindergarten classroom. She described standing amidst tiny cots and scattered toys, her gaze falling to a pile of small, discolored gas masks on the floor. In that instant, she was overcome by a wave of profound, almost unbearable sorrow, a feeling she attributed not to a ghost, but to the sheer, concentrated emotion of that final, terrified day. This is the unique terror of Pripyat, the fear of an invisible, lingering danger. The radioactive decay is a constant, silent companion, a reminder that the catastrophe is not truly over, merely dormant. Yet, amidst this decay, nature is staging a powerful and relentless reclamation. Trees burst through apartment floors, and wild animals roam the empty streets, creating a stark contrast between human failure and the enduring resilience of the natural world. The city stands as a monument to our own vulnerability, forcing us to ask, what is the true cost of progress, and how long does the psychological shadow of a single catastrophic event truly linger? Leaving this city of silent echoes, we now journey to a place where the earth itself unleashed a cataclysm, burying an entire community in an instant. The ghostly remains of a town once submerged for 25 years now break the surface of a vast, silent lake. In Argentina, the ruins of Villa Epecuén rise from the water like the bones of a forgotten dream. This was not always a graveyard of salt and stone. For much of the 20th century, it was a bustling, fashionable spa resort, famous for the therapeutic properties of the Lago Epecuén's salty waters. Thousands of tourists flocked here, filling its hotels and strolling its elegant avenues, seeking healing and relaxation. Then, in a single cataclysmic event in 1985, a dam burst after days of heavy rain, and the entire town was swallowed by the rising lake. The water did not recede for over 2 decades, leaving the world to believe Villa Epecuén was lost forever. A geographer who has studied the region notes that the changing climate and gradual evaporation finally began to pull the water back, slowly revealing a landscape utterly transformed by its long immersion. What emerged was a surreal, monochromatic world, a hauntingly beautiful necropolis where every surface, every twisted tree trunk, and every crumbling wall is encased in a thick, glittering crust of white salt. It is a place of profound solitude, broken only by the presence of one man, a former resident named Pablo Novik, who returned to become the town's sole symbolic caretaker, living alone amidst the ghosts of his own past. He is a living specter in a city of the dead, a human anchor to the memories the water tried to erase. The phenomena here are as subtle and pervasive as the salt in the air. Visitors and photographers speak of the constant, low sound of the receding lake water, a sound that many interpret as a chorus of faint, desperate whispers rising from the ruins. Others report seeing fleeting, ethereal figures dressed in old-fashioned bathing attire, phantom vacationers forever enjoying a holiday that ended in disaster. One of the most compelling accounts comes from a documentary filmmaker who was shooting the skeletal remains of a grand hotel. While reviewing his footage later, he noticed a clear, pale face staring from the salt-encrusted window of a second-floor room that was completely inaccessible, a room that had been empty for decades. This forces us to confront a different kind of specter, one born not of war or industry, but of environmental disaster and the slow, relentless power of nature. What memories were swallowed by those waters, and what echoes have been left behind in the crushing solitude? The story of Villa Epecuén is a tale of re-emergence, a reminder that the past, no matter how deeply buried, will always find a way to surface. This tale of a town reclaimed by water leads us to a fortress that never knew a moment of peace. The wind whips across the vast, sandy expanse of Fort Ord, whistling through the skeletal remains of barracks and rattling the corrugated metal of long-abandoned motor pools. This sprawling landscape on the California coast holds a different kind of military ghost, one born not of foreign battlefields, but of the intense preparation for them. For over 8 decades, this was a primary training ground for the United States Army, a place where millions of young men were forged into soldiers from the time of the First World War, right up to its official closure in the 1990s. A military historian specializing in the base described it as a pressure cooker of transformation, where individual identities were stripped away and rebuilt, leaving behind a powerful residue of shared anxiety, camaraderie, and sometimes profound personal tragedy. The hauntings reported here are not of celebrated war heroes, but of the countless souls whose stories ended within the base's own borders. Many soldiers died in training accidents, live fire exercises gone wrong, or from the invisible wounds that led them to take their own lives. Their spirits seem to be the ones left standing guard. Visitors and urban explorers consistently report hearing the phantom sound of a battalion marching in perfect, synchronized cadence, their boot falls echoing from empty parade grounds. Disembodied shouts of drill sergeants cut through the silence, and full-bodied apparitions of soldiers in period-specific uniforms are seen walking purposefully before vanishing into a wall or simply fading away. Specific locations are notorious hotspots. The old hospital, a place of both healing and suffering, is said to be alive with the sounds of moaning and the frantic activity of spectral medical staff. Certain barracks blocks where young men spent their last nights on American soil are permeated with a palpable sense of homesick dread. One park ranger assigned to patrol the now largely empty base has a recurring and chilling experience. On multiple occasions, deep in the dead of night when the park is completely closed and deserted, he has clearly heard the distinct, guttural sound of multiple Jeep engines turning over and starting up, followed by the crunch of tires on gravel, a ghostly motor pool springing to life for a mission that never was. This forces us to consider a poignant and often overlooked question. What becomes of the spirits of those who gave everything to the military, who endured its harshest trials, but who perished before they could ever fire a shot in anger? Are they forever trapped in the relentless loop of preparation, their sacrifice echoing through the decaying architecture of a home that was never truly a home? The military echoes of Fort Ord, a monument to preparation and sacrifice, now lead us to a place where the specters are those of colonial rule and a fierce, unresolved struggle for independence. A stark white Victorian mansion stands defiantly against the Australian sun, its ornate wrought iron and imposing facade belying the intense sorrow trapped within its walls. The Monte Cristo Homestead is not merely an old house, it is a preserved specimen of colonial-era anguish, a place where the rigid social hierarchies and personal tragedies of the 19th century seem to have fossilized into permanent hauntings. Built in the 1880s by the ambitious Christopher and Elizabeth Crawley, its prosperity was shadowed by a relentless series of grim misfortunes. A stable boy perished in a horrific fire, a young maid met her end in a fatal fall from a second-story balcony, and most heartbreakingly, a Crawley infant was reportedly dropped down the treacherous main staircase. A paranormal investigator who has spent countless nights in the home describes it as a pressure cooker of unresolved emotion, where the energy of these events has never dissipated. The phenomena reported are intensely personal and often aggressive. The stern ghost of Mrs. Crawley, still dressed in black mourning attire, is frequently seen gazing from an upper window, a permanent sentinel of her grief. In the old coach house, the spirit of the fallen maid is said to manifest, her presence accompanied by the sound of soft weeping. Far more disturbing are the physical interactions, where visitors describe the chilling sensation of an invisible hand gripping their throat or a sharp, painful push when no one is near. These occurrences are not random. They are deeply rooted in the home's history of strict class divisions, where servants lived in constant tension with their employers, and in the private, suffocating despair of a family that knew immense wealth but also profound loss. The preservation of Monte Cristo as a tourist attraction creates a complex dynamic. We are invited to walk through these rooms as spectators, yet the active, often hostile energy suggests the specters are not merely passive echoes. One visitor's experience has become legendary evidence. While photographing the exterior, he snapped a clear picture of the balcony from which the maid fell. The resulting image, developed and scrutinized, shows a distinct, translucent woman in period servant's clothing standing exactly where the tragedy occurred, her form looking not at the camera but inward into the house itself. This forces a difficult reflection on the foundations of nations built during this era. What unacknowledged sufferings and social brutalities are woven into the very fabric of these beautiful colonial homes? The ghosts of Monte Cristo are not just lost souls, they are the unresolved cries from a harsh and stratified past. From this homestead of domestic unrest, our path leads to a remote island where the concept of exile took on its most desperate form. The dense, suffocating humidity of the jungle is the first thing you notice on Isle du Diable. This small, rocky island off the coast of French Guiana was the most feared corner of France's infamous penal colony system, a place designed not for rehabilitation, but for the slow, torturous extinction of the human spirit. For nearly a century, this was the end of the line for France's most notorious criminals and political dissidents, a place of exile so brutal it was known as the dry guillotine. This was not a swift execution, but a prolonged death sentence carried out by tropical disease, backbreaking labor, malnutrition, and the relentless, soul-crushing despair of isolation. A contemporary account from a prison official described the conditions with chilling clarity, stating that the system was engineered to achieve two ends: to make the prisoner suffer and to make him forget that he is a man. Among the most famous inmates was Captain Alfred Dreyfus, wrongfully convicted of treason and imprisoned here for over 4 years in solitary confinement, a living symbol of a justice system gone horribly astray. But for every famous name, there were thousands of forgotten men who simply vanished into the jungle, their lives extinguished by yellow fever or the guards' brutality. The specters reported here are not subtle. Visitors and historians alike speak of hearing the distinct, heavy sound of iron chains being dragged across broken concrete, a sound that has no source in the present day. Desperate, weeping cries echo from the crumbling, vine-choked cells, especially at night. Full-bodied apparitions are seen as well, emaciated figures clad in the tattered remnants of their black and white-striped uniforms, shuffling through the ruins as if still searching for a freedom they never found in life. The island's intense isolation is a key part of its haunting. Surrounded by shark-infested waters and a dense, encroaching jungle that has spent decades reclaiming the stone barracks and punishment blocks, the entire place feels like a giant, open-air tomb. The stories of failed escape attempts only add to the tragic residue. Men would risk everything for a chance at freedom, only to be recaptured and condemned to even worse conditions, or to perish in the treacherous sea. One researcher documenting the site's history had to cut his expedition short. He reported being overcome by a sudden, debilitating wave of hopelessness so profound and physically oppressive that he could no longer bear to remain, feeling as if the collective despair of every prisoner who died there was pressing down on him, forcing him to abandon his work. This raises a deeply unsettling question about the nature of justice and the limits of human cruelty. How much suffering can a single patch of earth absorb before it becomes permanently scarred by the memory? The anguished prisoners of Devil's Island stand as eternal testament to a system where punishment crossed into torture, their spirits forever bound to the rock that was their prison. From this island of legalized suffering, we move to a final location that represents a very different kind of failure, a monument to grand ambition laid low by economic reality. Rising from the mists of the Hudson River, the skeletal remains of a Scottish-style castle create a scene of pure, romantic decay. This is Bannerman Castle, a monument not to kings or nobles, but to the eccentric commercial ambition of one man, Francis Bannerman VI. A military surplus dealer from Brooklyn, Bannerman purchased the island at the turn of the 20th century to store his vast inventory of surplus weapons and ammunition, everything from Civil War rifles to antique cannons. He then embarked on a deeply personal project, constructing this fantastical castle not as a home, but as a giant, ornate advertisement for his business. A preservationist working to stabilize the ruins notes that Bannerman was a true character, a man who saw no contradiction in building a fairy-tale fortress to house instruments of war, etching his own family name into the very stone. For decades, the castle served as a private arsenal and a quirky tourist attraction, until a catastrophic explosion and fire in the 1960s ripped through the structure, leaving it the haunting shell we see today. The specters here are as layered as the history. Many believe the spirit of Francis Bannerman himself, a man so proud of his creation, still walks the broken battlements. Visitors and boaters often report seeing the clear apparition of a man in Victorian dress, calmly observing the river from the crumbling walls. Others speak of hearing the phantom, joyous laughter of a family enjoying the island retreat, mixed with the more chilling echoes of the explosion itself, sudden, concussive booms that ripple across the water on quiet evenings. These phenomena suggest a haunting tied directly to both the creator's pride and the traumatic moment of the castle's destruction. The most compelling modern account comes from a kayaker who was paddling near the island long after sunset, when it was officially empty and locked down. He insists he saw a warm, flickering light moving steadily from window to window in the main arsenal building, as if someone were carrying a lantern through the hollow ruins, a silent, solitary vigil in a place that should have been utterly dark. This forces us to ponder the legacy of a man who built his dream around commerce and conflict. What does it mean when a castle for weapons becomes a ruin for ghosts? Is Bannerman's spirit forever bound to the beautiful, crumbling symbol of his life's work, a testament to the strange intersection of commerce, eccentricity, and accidental disaster? From this private fortress born of one man's vision, our path now leads to a very different kind of abandoned place, a public institution that concealed a terrible, dark secret within its walls. Its 5-story facade looms over the Kentucky hillside, a concrete monument to an era of medical desperation. Waverly Hills Sanatorium was not built for the living, but as a final holding place for thousands suffering from the White Plague, tuberculosis. At the height of the epidemic, this massive facility was a city of the dying, where the constant presence of death was so overwhelming that the staff constructed a hidden passageway known as the body chute, a grim, tunnel-like conveyor used to discreetly remove the deceased without shattering the morale of the patients who remained. A diary entry from a former nurse preserved from that time captures the overwhelming atmosphere, writing, "We are not fighting a disease here, we are merely watching it harvest souls." The sheer volume of suffering and sudden death has seemingly saturated the very brick and mortar. The phenomena reported by modern investigators are not subtle. Full-bodied apparitions of gaunt patients in period gowns are seen shuffling slowly through the long, tiled hallways. Dark, formless shadows, known as shadow people, dart across doorways and cluster in corners. One of the most frequently encountered spirits is said to be that of a young boy named Timmy, a playful presence who responds to questions with knocks and is known to roll a ball back to visitors in the otherwise empty children's ward. Yet not all the energy here is benign. The 5th-floor surgical ward and the infamous room 502 are considered epicenters of a more intense and sorrowful activity. Room 502 is where 2 nurses decades apart are rumored to have taken their own lives, one by hanging and the other by a fatal jump from the balcony. The air in this room is consistently described as heavy and difficult to breathe. One of the most chilling pieces of evidence ever captured came from a paranormal research team investigating this very room. In a moment of complete silence, their digital recorder captured a crystal-clear electronic voice phenomenon, a low, guttural male voice that issued a simple, terrifying command: "Get out." This raises a profound and unsettling question. In a place where the line between life and death was so thin and crossed so frequently, did that barrier simply wear away? Does the sheer concentration of human transition leave a permanent tear in the fabric of a location, allowing things to pass through or perhaps to remain trapped forever? The medical horrors of Waverly, a place of institutionalized dying, lead us to a final destination defined by a very different kind of isolation. The skeletal forms of trees reach upward through the broken roof of St. George's Church, their branches intertwining with the empty pews as if in silent prayer. This small Czech church in the village of Lukovar stands as a breathtaking tableau of nature reclaiming a sacred space, a process that began with a single, terrifying event in the 1960s. During a funeral service, a local priest attempted to perform an exorcism on the deceased, a ritual that, according to village law, went horribly wrong. Witnesses claimed the church roof began to violently shudder and then partially collapsed, an event the deeply superstitious community took as a sign of demonic wrath. The congregation fled, and the village was largely abandoned, leaving the church to the elements and to the legends that grew in its silence. For decades, it was known as a place of palpable dread, where villagers refused to go near, whispering that something malevolent had been invited in and never left. The eerie atmosphere was compounded by an unusual artistic intervention in 2012. An artist named Jakub Hadrova, seeking to capture the church's forlorn history, installed over 30 life-sized, ghostly statues made of plaster and wax, seating them silently in the pews. These pale, spectral figures were meant to represent the congregation that vanished, but something unexpected happened following their installation. While the church remained intensely atmospheric, many of the aggressive paranormal reports, the feelings of being pushed or hissed at, curiously diminished. A local historian suggested that the artist's installation had, in a way, returned the church to its purpose, pacifying the restless energy by restoring a symbolic congregation. Yet one spirit is said to remain active, a protective presence known as the one-armed bell ringer. The legend tells of a dedicated man who, even after losing an arm, continued to ring the church bells to ward off evil. It is believed his spirit now stands eternal watch, preventing the devil that was summoned during that fateful exorcism from ever entering the grounds again. Visitors today report a mix of subtle phenomena. The sound of phantom organ music sometimes drifts on the air, and many speak of the uncanny sensation of being watched not with malice, but with a quiet curiosity, as if the statue-like figures are simply observing. One traveler documented an experience that captures this shifted energy perfectly. She had entered the church alone, feeling the weight of its history, and sat on a crumbling step. Instead of fear, she was suddenly overcome with a profound and comforting sense of peace, as if an invisible hand had gently rested on her shoulder in a gesture of reassurance. This unique haunting forces us to reflect on the delicate balance between sanctity and desecration. Can a place once dedicated to faith ever truly be lost, or does a sacred purpose leave a permanent shield, a spiritual guardianship that endures long after the last human has left? The story of St. George's Church, where art quieted the storm, now guides us from the quiet Czech woods to the roaring, treacherous waters of the Atlantic, and a lighthouse that witnessed an unimaginable maritime tragedy. The Atlantic waters off Hatteras Island are a cold, relentless hunter, For centuries, sailors have known this stretch of the Outer Banks as the graveyard of the Atlantic, a name earned by the skeletal remains of thousands of ships torn apart by shifting shoals and sudden, violent storms. It is a place where the sea itself seems to hunger for stories, and few tales are more enduring than that of the ghost ship Mary Celeste. Found adrift in 1872 with its cargo intact and a meal still waiting on the table, the vessel was completely deserted, its crew vanished without a single clue. A maritime historian specializing in such mysteries notes that the enduring power of the Mary Celeste lies not in what was found, but in what was missing, a perfect void of explanation that has inspired ghost ship legends for over a century. While its physical wreck is lost to history, its spirit is inextricably tied to treacherous places like this. The specters of Hatteras are the legions of sailors who never made it to shore. Phantom schooners are sighted on the horizon, their tattered sails full of a wind that does not touch the surrounding sea. On stormy nights, the eerie, blue glow of St. Elmo's fire is seen dancing on the masts of ships that are not there, and veteran fishermen swear they can sometimes hear the faint, desperate blare of a foghorn cutting through the mist, a distress signal from a vessel that sank a century ago. This rich tapestry of nautical folklore is woven from very real dangers. The Diamond Shoals are a hidden, shifting labyrinth of sandbars that have gutted countless hulls. The lighthouse keepers who once manned the lonely outposts here were the solitary witnesses to these tragedies, their logs filled with accounts of ships that appeared one moment and were swallowed by the waves the next. A modern echo of this mystery comes from a Coast Guard officer stationed in the area. He reported a clear, large contact on his radar screen one night, a vessel heading directly for the most dangerous part of the shoals. He repeatedly attempted radio contact but received only static. As he watched, the blip simply vanished from the screen, leaving no wreckage, no mayday call, nothing but an empty sea and a profound sense of disbelief. What final, terrible secrets does the ocean choose to keep, locking them away in its crushing depths forever? The sea guards its ghosts well, but the land holds its own tragedies just as fiercely, as we see in a town strangled by the very enterprise that gave it life. Smoke rises from the earth itself in the nearly empty town of Centralia, Pennsylvania, seeping from cracks in the broken roads and vents in the barren ground. This is not the smoke of a simple fire, but the breath of a subterranean inferno that has been burning in the abandoned coal mines beneath the town since 1962. For over half a century, this relentless underground blaze has slowly consumed the community from below, transforming a once thriving mining hub into a ghost town shrouded in toxic fumes and profound loss. A geologist who has studied the site describes the fire as a perfect storm of fuel and geology, a coal seam ignited by a landfill fire that now follows the underground veins, a self-sustaining reaction that could potentially burn for another 250 years. The haunting of Centralia is twofold. It is the literal, physical danger of a landscape that can collapse without warning into the fire below, and it is the spectral echo of the vibrant community that was forced to abandon its homes. The phenomena reported here are deeply tied to this sudden, traumatic displacement. Visitors walking the now closed and graffiti-covered stretch of Route 61, often called the Graffiti Highway, frequently report the phantom scent of fresh coal smoke where no fire is visibly present. Apparitions are seen as well, shadowy figures of miners carrying picks, their forms glimpsed trudging along the tree lines that now conceal vanished streets. Most poignant are the reports of disembodied sounds, the faint, joyful laughter of children echoing from overgrown lots where swing sets and sandboxes once stood, a permanent auditory imprint of a life that was ripped away. These stories crystallized for one urban explorer who was documenting the steam vents. He was focusing his camera on a particularly large fissure when he saw it, the clear figure of a man in mining coveralls standing just a few yards away. The figure, he said, did not look at him with malice, but raised a hand in a firm, unmistakable gesture to stop, a silent warning from a past resident to stay away from the dangerous ground. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the apparition was gone. This encounter forces us to confront a chilling reality. What does it mean for a place to be literally and metaphorically burning from the inside out, its past and its physical reality both being consumed by an unstoppable force? The specters of Centralia are not just ghosts of people, but the ghost of an entire community, its memory forever linked to the slow, smoldering ruin of the land itself. From this town poisoned by its own foundation, our path turns to a very different kind of mystery, a castle dedicated not to industry, but to the ancient and secretive art of alchemy. Its walls were not raised to keep armies out, but to keep something ancient and unspeakable contained. Hauska Castle stands in the Czech countryside as one of the world's most architecturally perplexing fortresses, built directly over a bottomless pit that local folklore described as a gateway to hell itself. Legends speak of winged creatures and unnatural, hybrid beasts crawling from its depths, a chasm so feared that the castle was constructed for the sole purpose of sealing it shut. A local mythologist explains that the pagan stories of this place are far older than the stones of the castle, tales of a primordial void that disgorged entities which were not of this world. This foundational fear dictated the castle's bizarre design, with its thickest fortifications facing inward, its chapel built directly over the pit to sanctify the ground, and a complete lack of an external water source, as if no one ever expected a long siege from outside forces. The castle's dark reputation only deepened during the Second World War, when it was seized by the Nazi SS. It is widely believed that the Nazis, with their well-documented obsession with the occult, used the location for experiments, perhaps attempting to tap into the very power the castle was meant to contain. The hauntings reported within Hauska are unlike any we have encountered. Visitors and investigators do not speak of human ghosts, but of something far more abstract and terrifying. They report encounters with black, formless entities that shift in the peripheral vision, the sound of guttural, disembodied growls emanating from walls, and an overwhelming sense of psychological distress and creeping dread, particularly in the chapel above the pit. This is not a residual echo of past human suffering, but a confrontation with the malevolent unknown the castle was meant to imprison. A chilling modern account comes from a construction worker hired for renovations in the late 20th century. He was tasked with working in the lower levels when he suddenly froze, hearing a chorus of unearthly, agonized screams that seemed to rise from the stone beneath his feet. He dropped his tools, fled the castle, and refused to ever set foot inside again, no matter the financial incentive. This raises a profound and unsettling question about our own nature. When faced with a literal void, a gaping maw of the unknown, is our first instinct not to explore it, but to wall it up, to bury it under stone and sanctity, hoping that what we do not understand will simply remain forgotten. Hauska Castle stands as a monument to that very human impulse, a fortress built against the darkness within the earth itself. The crumbling ochre arches of Sans-Souci Palace stand as a broken crown upon the Haitian hills. This was the grand vision of King Henry Christophe, a man who fought as a key leader in the Haitian Revolution to liberate his people from slavery, only to later crown himself monarch of the nation he helped create. His reign was a paradox of immense ambition and brutal authority, a Caribbean historian specializing in the period, notes that Cristo was a man in a desperate race against time, attempting to prove to a hostile world that a Black Kingdom could equal the splendor and power of any European empire. He forced the construction of this magnificent palace, along with the immense Citadelle La Ferrière fortress, using a system of corvée labor that many historians describe as a new form of servitude for the very people he had helped free. The hauntings reported here are layered with this complex legacy of power and pain. The most prominent specter is the king himself. His stern, full-bodied apparition, often seen in military regalia, is said to pace the ruined galleries and stand silently in the roofless throne room, a permanent guardian of his crumbling domain. Alongside his presence are the echoes of the palace's violent end. Visitors consistently report hearing the phantom sounds of construction, the rhythmic tap of hammers and the strain of ropes, as if the enslaved laborers are forever building his dream. These sounds are sometimes followed by the terrifying, loud crash of a collapsing roof, a spectral replay of the earthquake that shattered the palace shortly after his death. The phenomena are deeply tied to the physical and emotional trauma of this place. One tourist's account provides a chillingly personal connection. While standing alone in the expansive throne room, she was suddenly overcome by a sharp, stabbing pain in her chest, a sensation so acute it forced her to her knees. The pain vanished as quickly as it came, leaving no physical mark, but leaving her with the unshakable conviction that she had felt an echo of King Christopher's fatal stroke, the very event that ended his life and precipitated the palace's abandonment. This haunting forces us to reflect on the fragile ghosts of empires that never were, of thrones built on liberation that then succumbed to the very tyrannies they overthrew. What remains when a king's dream collapses upon itself, leaving only stone and sorrow in its wake? The ruins of Sans-Souci are a monument to the tragic paradox of power seized and then tragically lost. From the sun-bleached stones of a Caribbean kingdom, we journey to the frigid silence of a Soviet scientific utopia that met a similarly deserted fate. A bronze bust of Vladimir Lenin still stares out across a frozen bay, his gaze fixed on a glacier and the hollow buildings of a town that communism forgot. This is Pyramiden, a Soviet coal mining settlement on the Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard, abandoned so swiftly in 1998 that it feels less like a ghost town and more like a snapshot of a society that simply vanished. It was designed as the ultimate propaganda tool, a thriving, fully equipped Arctic utopia meant to showcase the superiority of the Soviet system, complete with a cultural palace, a swimming pool, and the world's northernmost statue of Lenin. A former resident once described it as a life in a beautiful snow globe, completely cut off from the world, where everyone knew their role and the state provided everything. But when the coal subsidies dried up and the political landscape shifted, the entire population was evacuated in a matter of months, leaving behind their belongings, their dreams, and their ideological showcase. The specters of Pyramiden are the chilling echoes of that failed social experiment. Visitors to this remote outpost, now accessible only by boat in the brief summer, consistently report the same phenomena. The most common is the sound of phantom piano music drifting from the derelict cultural palace, a haunting melody that plays in a building where the actual instrument is too damaged to produce a single note. In the vast, empty dormitories, dark figures are seen moving past windows in rooms that have been sealed for decades. Nearly everyone who walks the dusty streets speaks of the persistent, unnerving feeling of being watched from 1,000 empty panes of glass. This is a haunting of profound absence, a place where the collective spirit of a community was extinguished almost overnight. The sheer isolation and extreme cold have acted as a perfect preservative, turning Pyramiden into a time capsule. A documentary crew filming there captured this perfectly when they entered the main cafeteria. On one of the long tables, they found a single-place setting, a plate, a cup, and cutlery, all arranged neatly as if a miner had just finished a meal, stood up, and never returned. It was a silent, powerful testament to the suddenness of the departure. What remains when an entire ideology collapses, leaving only its empty monuments to be reclaimed by the polar bears and the relentless Arctic wind? The frozen silence of Pyramiden offers no easy answer, only the ghost of a political dream preserved in ice. From this Arctic monument to a frozen ideology, our path now leads to the sweltering heat of a tropical island where the specters are those of war. The jungle has an insatiable appetite for conquest, and on Corregidor Island, it is slowly winning its war against concrete and steel. Vines strangle rusted artillery pieces, and dense foliage swallows the entrances to tunnels that once echoed with the footsteps of thousands. This small, tadpole-shaped island at the entrance to Manila Bay was the linchpin of the Allied defense in the Philippines during World War II, a fortress subjected to a relentless 5-month siege by the Japanese. When food and ammunition were exhausted, and the bombardment had reduced the landscape to rubble, the American and Filipino forces surrendered in what became the largest defeat in American military history. A war historian specializing in the Pacific Theater describes the conditions as a special kind of hell, where soldiers endured constant shelling, rampant disease, and the slow, grinding erosion of any hope of rescue. The subsequent recapture of the island only added another layer of violence to its soil. This concentrated agony of siege, surrender, and brutal occupation has left a permanent scar. The phenomena reported here are not solitary ghosts, but the spectral remnants of entire armies locked in an endless, repeating conflict. The most intense hauntings are centered in the dark, claustrophobic heart of the island, the Maylinta Tunnel. This labyrinthine network served as a hospital, headquarters, and final shelter, a place of unimaginable suffering, especially for the prisoners of war who were held there under horrific conditions. To this day, visitors and guides report the disembodied sounds of battle that seem to rise from the very rock, the rattle of phantom gunfire, the crisp cadence of marching boots, and the distant, agonized screams of the wounded and dying. The strategic importance of the island is now overshadowed by its role as a vast war memorial, a place where the echoes of strategy have been replaced by the echoes of sacrifice. One of the most compelling and consistent accounts comes from a veteran tour guide who has spent decades leading groups through the tunnels. He recounts that on quiet afternoons when the crowds have thinned, he regularly hears the clear, distinct sound of whispers. They are not in one language but two, a chaotic mix of Japanese and English murmuring just beyond the reach of his flashlight beam, as if the command staff of both armies are still arguing over their maps in the eternal gloom. This forces us to pause and truly remember the human cost of such a place, not in terms of military victories or defeats, but in the individual lives shattered and left behind in the darkness. From this island where the specters of conflict are forever entrenched, we journey to a place built for peace and contemplation, a monastery that now stands as a monument to faith abandoned. The empty stone houses of Kayakuri cling to the Turkish hillside like a flock of silent, roofless birds. This is not a ruin born of plague or war, but of politics and a forced exodus. For centuries, this was Lavisi, a vibrant community where Greek Christians and Turkish Muslims lived and worked alongside one another in remarkable harmony. That peaceful coexistence was shattered by the 1923 population exchange between Greece and Turkey, a massive, government-mandated swap of ethnic minorities that rendered this thriving town obsolete overnight. Its entire Greek population was compelled to leave, walking away from the homes, churches, and schools their families had built over generations. A descendant of those original inhabitants once wrote of returning, saying, "The stones do not weep, but if you listen, they hum with the sadness of 1,000 interrupted songs." The haunting here is one of profound and gentle melancholy. Visitors walking the empty lanes often catch the sudden, rich aroma of Greek coffee brewing, a scent that evaporates as quickly as it appears. From the shell of the large church of the Pripyat, the faint, melodic strains of Orthodox hymns sometimes drift on the breeze, a service forever being sung for a congregation that can never return. And in the fading light of evening, dark, quiet figures are glimpsed standing in doorways, not as threats, but as silent sentinels of a life that was lost. This is a specter of cultural erasure and the deep, lingering trauma of displacement. The village stands as a monument not to conflict, but to the peace that was possible and the communities that were severed. One writer documented an experience that captures this emotional residue perfectly. She was walking through the main street, admiring the stark beauty, when she was suddenly and overwhelmingly compelled to weep. There was no trigger, no sad memory, just a wave of grief so powerful and inexplicable that it stopped her in her tracks. She later described it as if the land itself was crying through her, mourning the loss of its people. This forces us to ask a difficult question about the ghosts we create not through violence but through policy. What becomes of the spiritual imprint of a community that is physically removed, its social fabric deliberately torn? The specters of Kayakuri are the quiet, persistent echoes of a shared home that was forcibly made into two separate homelands. From this village of exile and lost harmony, we step into the gilded cage of a hotel that traded Hollywood dreams for a permanent nightmare. The shimmering glow of Hollywood fame casts long, dark shadows, and perhaps nowhere are those shadows more alive than within the Spanish colonial walls of the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. Since its gala opening in the 1920s, this landmark has been the playground for cinema's brightest stars, from Charlie Chaplin to Clark Gable, a place where legends were made both on and off the screen. But such intense, concentrated glamour often comes with a hidden cost of personal tragedy and untimely death, emotional energies that seem to have taken up permanent residence. A hotel historian familiar with its long legacy notes that the Roosevelt is a repository of secrets, a place where the glittering facade often masked profound personal struggles, from scandalous affairs to struggles with addiction and despair. This collision of public adoration and private pain has created a perfect storm for spectral activity. The phenomena are as star-studded as its guest list. The spirit of Marilyn Monroe, who once lived here for 2 years, is most frequently encountered in her old suite, where guests report seeing her stunning reflection staring back at them from a full-length mirror that is no longer there. The ghost of actor Montgomery Clift, who stayed in room 928 during the filming of From Here to Eternity, is still heard practicing the trumpet he learned for his role, the lonely notes echoing down the hallway late at night. Other occurrences are less specific but equally unsettling. Vacant ballrooms suddenly fill with the sounds of a swinging jazz party, complete with clinking glasses and ghostly laughter, only to fall silent the moment a door is opened. In the famous Tropicana pool, which boasts a stunning David Hockney mural, the playful spirit of a young girl is often seen, her giggles heard skipping across the water. The hotel has learned to embrace its haunted reputation, even offering themed tours, yet some encounters defy any commercial explanation. One guest awoke abruptly in the middle of the night to find the translucent figure of a man in 1930s formal wear sitting calmly on the edge of her bed. He simply watched her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before slowly fading into the surrounding darkness, leaving behind only a profound chill and a single, lingering question. What is the true price of fame? Is the adoration of millions a fair trade for a spirit that may never find rest, forever bound to the scene of its greatest triumphs and most private sorrows? The phantoms of the Hollywood Roosevelt are not monsters but the echoes of beautiful, fractured dreams. Leaving the gilded cage of Tinseltown behind, our search for lost souls now follows a steadfast beam of light cutting through the ocean's gloom. A steadfast beam of light sweeps across the dark waters off the Florida coast, a lonely guardian against the treacherous shoals. The St. Augustine Lighthouse, with its iconic black and white stripes, stands as an active sentinel with a past steeped in profound sorrow. Its iron spiral staircase was forged in tragedy, as several workers lost their lives during its construction in the 1870s, a grim foreshadowing of the personal heartbreak to come. The most enduring specters here are those of the lighthouse keeper's own daughters. Historical records confirm that two young girls playing in a cart on the property were killed when it broke loose and tumbled into the water. A paranormal investigator who has spent countless nights in the tower describes the energy as a mixture of deep grief and playful innocence, a combination that creates some of the most compelling phenomena anywhere. Visitors and staff consistently report the sound of disembodied children's laughter echoing up the stairwell, followed by the frantic pitter-patter of small, running feet. The apparition of a man in blue overalls, believed to be one of the fallen construction workers, is often seen on the catwalk, forever maintaining the light he helped build. These experiences are frequently accompanied by sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature, cold spots that feel like a passage through a wall of ice. One of the most famous pieces of evidence came from a photographer documenting the interior. He was alone, focusing his camera up the breathtaking spiral of the staircase when he captured a single, misty frame. In it, the translucent figure of a young girl, her form faint and ethereal, appears to be peering down from between the iron rails, a silent observer from another time. This lighthouse is more than a museum. It is a place where duty and personal tragedy became forever intertwined. What does it mean for a guide meant to ensure safe passage to be haunted by those who met such untimely ends? Are these the spirits of the coast's eternal guardians, bound to their posts by love, loss, and an unshakable sense of responsibility? From this guiding light above the waves, we now descend into a city of perpetual silence, a labyrinth of tunnels built not for the living, but as a final home for millions of souls. A cold, damp breath seems to rise from the very stone beneath the City of Light. Deep below the bustling streets of Paris lies a silent, parallel city built not of brick, but of bone, the final resting place for over 6 million souls. This is the Paris catacombs, an endless ossuary network created out of sheer necessity in the late 18th century, when the city's cemeteries literally burst their seams, contaminating the earth and air. The solution was as macabre as it was practical: to relocate the dead into the abandoned limestone quarries, meticulously stacking their remains into walls of femurs and skulls that stretch for miles. A longtime catacombs guide describes the atmosphere as one of enforced reverence, a place where the sheer scale of mortality humbles every visitor who walks through the gateway inscribed with the warning, "Stop." This is the empire of death, yet this empire was never entirely silent. During the French Revolution, these dark passages became a clandestine highway for fugitives and plotters, absorbing the frantic energy of fear and rebellion into its ancient walls. That energy seems to have lingered, intertwined with the presence of the millions interred here. The phenomena reported are as pervasive as the bones themselves. Disembodied whispers weave through the stacks, speaking in languages just beyond comprehension. Dark, fluid shadows are seen darting between the arches, moving with a purpose that feels anything but human. Most unsettling are the physical interactions, the distinct, cold sensation of an unseen hand brushing against an arm or tugging at a jacket in the absolute stillness. This hidden world has also spawned its own subculture of modern explorers known as cataphiles, individuals who illegally map and inhabit the deeper, off-limits sections, creating secret galleries and dining rooms in the perpetual gloom. They speak of the catacombs as a living entity, one that can be both benevolent and hostile. One such explorer's account has become legend among them. He was hopelessly lost in an unmapped section, his flashlight failing when he clearly heard a calm, female voice directing him to turn left, then right. He followed the instructions and soon found an exit grate leading to safety. When he looked back into the darkness to thank his savior, there was no one there, only the silent, watching skulls. Confronting this ossuary force is a stark and personal reflection. What does your own life amount to when measured against such an immense, anonymous collective of the dead? The catacombs are a monument to urban planning and the inescapable reality of mortality, a realm where the boundary between the living and the dead feels terrifyingly thin. From this empire of bone, our path now ascends into a palace where the specters of artistic genius and madness dance an eternal, discordant waltz. Even the grandest fortune can become a prison of gilded sorrow. In the heart of St. Louis stands the Lemp Mansion, a stately home that was once the epicenter of a vast brewing empire and is now a monument to a family's seemingly inescapable tragedy. The Lemp family name was synonymous with success, their logger a national sensation that built an incredible fortune. Yet within these ornate walls, a dark pattern emerged, a series of suicides that would earn the home its grim nickname, the Monster House. It began with the patriarch William Lemp Sr., who was shattered by the death of his favorite son and heir. He took his own life in the mansion, a profound act of grief that seemed to cast a pall over the entire family. His son, William Jr., would later do the same in the very same office, his despair fueled by the collapse of prohibition on the family business. The sorrow did not end there. Another son, Charles, also died by suicide within the home, and the family's heartbreak extended to a daughter, Elsa Lemp, who, despite her own wealth and marriage, took her own life in a separate residence. A psychic who investigated the property described it as saturated with the energy of despair, a thick, heavy presence that clings to every room. The phenomena reported are as varied as they are chilling. The apparition of William Lemp Sr. is frequently seen in the basement, a brooding presence near the old loggering tunnels that were the source of his fortune. The sound of phantom parties, echoes of the mansion's glittering past, often drift through the halls, a stark contrast to the pervasive sadness, and the ghost of the tragic Elsa Lemp is said to wander the upper floors, her restless spirit a poignant reminder of the personal anguish that festered behind the public success. The mansion now operates as a restaurant and in its dark history a macabre draw for guests. One diner's experience has become a classic tale. He was seated for a meal, his wine glass placed squarely on the table. As he spoke with his companion, they both watched in stunned silence as the full glass slowly, deliberately slid all the way across the polished wood, entirely on its own before stopping at the table's edge. No one had touched it, and the surface was perfectly level. This cascade of personal tragedy, intertwined with the collapse of a commercial empire, forces a difficult question upon us. Can any amount of wealth or public success truly shield a family from its own private demons? Or does the pressure of maintaining a legacy sometimes become the very weight that drags it down into darkness? The Lemp Mansion stands as a somber testament to the idea that some curses are not spoken, but inherited with the family name. From this house of familial sorrow, we journey to a remote island where society itself cast out those it deemed unwanted. The formidable stone walls of Spinalonga Island rise from the Cretan Sea, a Venetian fortress built to repel invaders that later became a prison of a different kind. For over half a century, this small island was a compulsory home for those diagnosed with leprosy, a place of absolute exile where men, women, and even children were sent to live out their days separated from the world they knew. A historian specializing in the period notes that the stigma of the disease was often a greater burden than the physical symptoms, a social death sentence that preceded the physical one. Yet within these imposing walls, the exiled forged a remarkable community, complete with a school, cafes, and even a theater, fighting to maintain their humanity in the face of abandonment. The hauntings reported here are not of anger, but of a profound and gentle sorrow. Phantom figures are seen in the crumbling hospital, their forms gaunt and still. The sound of wet, ragged coughing echoes from empty houses long after the last patient was cured and the colony closed in 1957. An overwhelming, palpable sense of loneliness permeates the air, especially in the small, individual houses where residents lived out their isolated lives. One visitor's deeply personal encounter has become a poignant part of the island's lore. While walking alone through the narrow, deserted streets of the village, she felt a sudden, gentle pressure on her hand. Looking down, she saw nothing, but the sensation was unmistakable, the feeling of a thin, bony hand slipping into hers, holding it for a brief moment in a gesture of silent companionship before fading away. This spectral touch speaks to the very heart of the human condition, the innate need for connection and comfort, even in the most desolate of circumstances. What does it truly mean to be separated from everything and everyone you love, and yet still find the strength to build a society from nothing? The story of Spinalonga is a haunting lesson in resilience, a testament to the dignity that can flourish even in the shadow of despair. This story of isolation in a community brings us to a theater where the final curtain call never came. A gilded balcony overlooks a stage where the ghosts of vaudeville and modern Broadway seem to share the same air. The historic Orpheum Theater in Memphis has been a temple of live performance since the 1920s, its velvet seats and ornate ceilings witnessing a century of applause, but its most loyal attendee is a spectator who never leaves. She is known simply as Mary, the spirit of a young girl who, according to local legend, was tragically killed in a streetcar accident on the avenue outside the theater. Her love for the stage was so profound that her spirit apparently found its way back inside, becoming the Orpheum's permanent resident ghost. The theater's longtime manager has often spoken of her, noting Mary is part of the family here, a friendly presence the entire staff has come to respect. Many actors before a big opening night will even call out, "This one's for you, Mary," a small tribute to their unseen audience member. Her preferred seat is in the balcony, specifically seat C102, where patrons and staff have consistently reported the sudden, sweet scent of a floral perfume in the otherwise empty space. The phenomena extend beyond a simple fragrance. Stagehands report lights that flicker on and off without a hand touching a switch, and props that are meticulously set only to be found gently moved to a different, yet perfectly logical position. This touches on the deep-seated world of theatrical superstition, where every actor knows never to whistle in a dressing room or utter the name of the Scottish play, and where the spirit of a child feels like a protective, rather than a frightening charm. The story of Mary is a haunting born from a tragic accident, but it has transformed into something else entirely, a narrative of continuity and gentle guardianship. One stagehand's account perfectly illustrates this relationship. During a frantic scene change in a major production, a critical prop, a vintage pocket watch, went missing. With only seconds to spare before the curtain rose, the stagehand whispered a desperate plea into the empty wings. He swears that a moment later, he felt a gentle tug on his pant leg and looked down to see the watch sitting neatly on the floor directly beside him, as if it had been placed there. It raises a beautiful, poignant question. When the final curtain falls on a performer's life, does the art they loved possess a power strong enough to hold their essence within its walls? The Orpheum suggests that the show does not always have to end, that the love of a story can be a force that echoes through time itself. From this stage of eternal performance, we travel to a town where the promise of wealth dissolved into dust and silence. Dust devils spin across the main street of Bodie, California, kicking up grit between the weathered wooden buildings. This is not a reconstruction. It is a ghost town preserved in a state of arrested decay, a place frozen at the exact moment its last residents walked away, leaving their possessions and their stories behind. During the gold rush boom of the late 19th century, Bodie was a legend of lawlessness, a roaring settlement of nearly 10,000 souls where fortune and death were constant companions. Saloons and brothels operated 24 hours a day, and the cemetery grew as quickly as the town itself, filled with those who fell to gunfights, bar brawls, and the brutal, unforgiving cold of the high desert. A park ranger tasked with the town's care explains that their mission is not to restore, but to stabilize, to hold this fragile moment in time exactly as they found it, a museum of abandonment where the past feels unnervingly present. The phenomena reported here are the echoes of that violent, transient life. After sunset, the phantom clink of glasses and the tinny sound of a saloon piano drift from buildings that have been silent for over a century. Apparitions of miners in dusty denim and women in faded period dresses are seen peering from upstairs windows, their forms solid one moment and gone the next. Many visitors speak of the persistent, unsettling sensation of being followed, of hearing the soft crunch of a footstep just behind them on the gravel when they know they are completely alone. This energy seems concentrated in specific structures. The old schoolhouse where the spirit of a young child is often reported has become a particular hotspot. One visitor's experience has become a classic tale of Bodie's haunting. He was attempting to photograph the interior of the school, his modern digital camera functioning perfectly. Yet, every time he aimed his lens at a specific corner where a small desk sat, the camera would instantly and inexplicably power down. The battery, which was fully charged, would show as empty. He could move to a different part of the room and the camera would work flawlessly, only to fail again when pointed back at that one spot. It was as if an unseen presence was fiercely guarding its solitude. Can you fathom the desperate hopes that built a town like this, the dreams of wealth that so often ended in a lonely, violent death on a dusty street? The Wild West spirit of Bodie, a monument to boom and bust, now leads us to a very different kind of relic, one born from the silent, global tension of the Cold War. Deep beneath the opulent ballrooms and manicured golf courses of the Greenbrier Resort lies a silent city of steel and concrete, a sprawling secret built for the end of the world. This was not a place for vacation, but for preservation, a massive underground bunker designed to shield the entire United States Congress from a nuclear attack. Code-named Project Greek Island, its construction was a feat of Cold War paranoia, an elaborate secret maintained for over 3 decades. For the small, trusted group of employees who knew of its existence, life was a surreal paradox. A former maintenance worker once described the experience as living in two realities at once, descending each day from a world of cocktail parties and chamber music into a sterile, subterranean fortress stocked with enough supplies to sustain government for months, all while smiling and serving guests who had no idea what lay beneath their feet. The bunker itself, revealed to a stunned public in 1992, is a monument to a very specific kind of fear. It contains a vast auditorium for congressional sessions, dormitories with hundreds of identical beds, and a television studio from which officials could address the nation, presuming a nation still remained. While no traditional ghosts are said to walk these halls, the entire complex is haunted by the immense psychological weight of the secret it held. Visitors and staff frequently report an oppressive, almost claustrophobic feeling of secrecy, a lingering sense of the colossal lie that was lived here for so long. Some have reported hearing the faint, phantom blare of a practice alarm drill, a sound that once signaled a rehearsal for global annihilation. The air in the decontamination chambers feels unnervingly thick and still. One longtime tour guide has a particularly persistent experience. Every time she stands in the cavernous communications room, surrounded by the ghosts of outdated technology, she feels a distinct, constant sensation of being watched. It is not a malevolent presence but a vigilant one, as if the spirit of the Cold War itself, the ever-watchful eye of national security, remains eternally on duty. This place forces us to ask, what does it do to the human psyche to live every day with the tangible expectation of total destruction, to build a beautiful facade while preparing for the worst underneath? The Greenbrier bunker is a specter of political fear, a perfectly preserved capsule of the anxieties that silently shaped a generation. From this hidden fortress of state secrets, we ascend to a hotel where a very different, more personal tragedy left its mark. Perched high in the Colorado Rockies, the Stanley Hotel presents a facade of grand white colonial revival elegance against a backdrop of stark, imposing peaks. Its majestic isolation is precisely what captivated author Stephen King, whose stay here one night directly inspired the Overlook Hotel in his terrifying novel, The Shining. Yet long before it became a literary landmark, this was the passion project of Freelan Oscar Stanley, co-inventor of the Stanley Steamer automobile, who built the luxury resort in the early 1900s as a restorative retreat for the Eastern elite. A longtime staff member notes that the hotel's energy is a complex tapestry, woven from high society glamour, personal tragedies, and the creative chaos it later inspired. The most benevolent presence is said to be that of Flora Stanley herself, whose love for music still manifests in the faint, melodic strains of her piano playing from the empty concert hall late at night. Alongside her are the playful, echoing laughter of children heard running through the hallways, a sound that chills the blood when you remember the building is otherwise silent. The phenomena are as varied as the guests, both living and departed. Visitors in certain rooms have reported opening their luggage to find their belongings neatly unpacked by invisible hands. The famous room 217 is a perpetual hotspot, where lights flicker without cause and the ghost of a former housekeeper is said to tidy up for startled occupants. Down in the grand ballroom, the sounds of a phantom party often drift through the air, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of a spectral crowd forever celebrating a bygone era. This embrace of its own supernatural reputation is a key part of the hotel's modern identity, transforming it from a mere historic building into a living character in its own story. One guest's terrifying account encapsulates this active energy. He awoke abruptly to the violent, sustained shaking of his bed, rattling so fiercely he was nearly thrown to the floor. He was completely alone in the locked room, and the seismic trembling stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving him shaken in the profound silence. This raises a compelling question about the nature of such iconic places. Why do some locations become such powerful magnets for stories, both fictional and paranormal? Is it the isolation, the concentration of human emotion, or does a place somehow absorb the creative energy of those it inspires, becoming a collaborative work of art between the past and our own imaginations? The Stanley stands as a testament to that very idea, a grand hotel where the line between a celebrated story and a spectral truth is beautifully, terrifyingly blurred. This iconic landmark of inspired terror leads us from the mountains to a remote island defined by shipwrecks and absolute solitude. A thin, crescent-shaped sliver of sand appears from the ocean fog, a place so remote it feels less like an island and more like a mirage. Sable Island is a 40-kilometer-long sandbar adrift in the North Atlantic, a place of ship-swallowing shoals and sudden, violent storms that have earned it a grim title, the Graveyard of the Atlantic. For centuries, this lonely outpost has been a final, desperate refuge for sailors whose vessels were torn apart on the hidden sandbars, a place of marooned isolation where survival was never guaranteed. A shipwreck survivor from the 1800s wrote of the profound despair that set in upon washing ashore, describing a landscape of endless dunes and the crushing realization that rescue might never come. Today, the island is home only to a small, rotating crew of meteorologists and a mysterious population of wild horses, whose origins are as shrouded in legend as the island itself. The true residents, however, seem to be the countless sailors who never left. The phenomena here are born of the sea's relentless fury. Phantom schooners are seen materializing from the thick fog, their spectral sails full of a phantom wind before they vanish into the mist. Apparitions of figures in heavy oilskin coats are spotted trudging along the desolate beaches, their heads bowed against a storm that only they can feel. Most chilling are the auditory hauntings, the clear, desperate sound of a ship's bell tolling or a faint, crackling distress signal that seems to bleed through on stormy nights, a broadcast from a vessel lost decades ago. This is a haunting defined by maritime disaster and the raw, desperate will to survive against impossible odds. The island's fragile ecosystem, a delicate balance of wind-sculpted dunes and hardy grasses, stands in stark contrast to the brutal history buried just beneath its shifting surface. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came from a researcher studying the wild horse population. While taking shelter in the island's historic lighthouse during a gale, he decided to test the atmosphere with a digital recorder. In a moment of complete silence, his device captured a crystal-clear electronic voice phenomenon, a ragged, desperate male voice pleading, "Is anyone out there? Can you hear me?" The recording was made in a structure that had been empty for hours. This forces a somber reflection on the dual nature of the ocean itself. It is a source of life and a highway for commerce, yet it holds the power to erase lives and entire ships without a trace, leaving only their echoes to wander a lonely shore. What does it mean for a spirit to be forever stranded, never reaching the safety of a mainland or the peace of a proper grave? The marooned sailors of Sable Island are eternal castaways, their pleas forever carried on the salt-laden wind. From this sandy graveyard of the sea, our journey turns inland to a castle where the specters are not of common sailors, but of kings and the royal intrigue that sealed their fate. Stone turrets pierce the Scottish sky, their baronial grandeur concealing a history of aristocratic cruelty. Fyvie Castle is a masterpiece of Scottish architecture, but its opulent rooms are haunted by the ghost of a woman betrayed. She is known as the Green Lady, often identified as Dame Lilias Drummond, a wife whose husband, Alexander Seton, grew tired of her when she failed to produce a male heir. According to the chilling legend, he imprisoned her in a chamber and starved her to death, a slow and agonizing end for a woman of noble birth. Her spirit refuses to rest, and her presence is announced by a soft, persistent scratching sound, as if a fingernail were slowly etching letters into glass. Visitors and staff have reported finding the name Lilia's clearly scratched into a window pane, a spectral signature that reappears no matter how many times it is polished away. A longtime castle steward has noted that 5e is a palimpsest of pain, with each generation adding its own layer of sorrow and spectral activity to the stones. Beyond the Green Lady, other phantoms fill the castle. The sound of a phantom trumpeter is sometimes heard, a mournful fanfare from the battlements that tradition says heralds doom for the castle's owners. This curse intertwines with the legend of the Weeping Stones, 3 mystical stones built into the foundation that are said to shed tears before a tragedy befalls the family. The phenomena are rooted in the brutal realities of Scottish nobility, where family lineage and power often overrode compassion, and architectural secrets were woven with superstition. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence came from a tourist who was photographing the castle's exterior from the grounds. He snapped a picture of a specific window, one that was known to be empty and locked. When he reviewed the image, there was a clear, sorrowful woman's face staring back at him from behind the glass, her features pale and distinct. The room had been completely vacant. What legacies do we leave behind when love curdles into betrayal and ambition demands a human sacrifice? The royal ghosts of Scotland, bound by promises and poisoned by family intrigue, now guide us to a very different institution, a hospital where the specters are not of noble birth, but of patients subjected to unthinkable human experimentation. The sprawling brick complex of the Alois Asylum was a city unto itself, a self-contained world for those society had cast aside. For more than 150 years, this massive facility in Michigan operated as a poorhouse, a hospital, and a psychiatric asylum, housing thousands of indigent, mentally ill, and infirm patients under one roof. Its history is a shadowy tapestry of early social welfare, interwoven with persistent rumors of unethical medical experiments and generally poor, overcrowded conditions. A historical researcher who has dedicated years to studying Alois's records once noted the profound challenge of uncovering the truth, stating, "The individual lives here are often reduced to a line in a ledger, a name on an intake form, their personal stories swallowed by the sheer scale of the institution's operation." This erasure of identity seems to have left a deep, restless energy in the decaying buildings that remain. Urban explorers and paranormal investigators report a constant, unnerving sense of being watched, a feeling that multiplies in the labyrinthine network of steam tunnels that connected the various wards. Full-bodied apparitions in period patient gowns or nurse uniforms are frequently seen, their forms solid and purposeful before they vanish around a corner. The air is often pierced by disembodied screams and desperate, weeping cries that seem to emanate from the very walls, a chorus of past anguish that has never fallen silent. These accounts force us to confront the darker chapters of social welfare history and the evolving, often troubling, standards of medical ethics. The very architecture of the place, designed for control and segregation, seems to hold the emotional residue of those who lived and died within its confines. One explorer's terrifying encounter has become a stark warning. He was documenting the old kitchen area, a space known for its oppressive atmosphere, when he felt a sudden, violent shove against his back. The force was strong enough to send him stumbling forward, his equipment scattering across the grimy floor. He was completely alone in the room, with no one and nothing that could have physically touched him. This aggressive act raises a difficult and poignant question that echoes far beyond the asylum's walls. How do we, as a society, treat our most vulnerable members, and what legacy do we leave when their suffering is institutionalized and forgotten? The specters of Eloise are not merely ghosts, they are the unresolved echoes of countless silenced voices demanding to be remembered. From this monument to collective suffering, our journey turns to a structure built for a singular, profound emotion, a lighthouse born from one man's enduring love. Its gleaming white marble domes are a testament to love carved in stone. The Taj Mahal rises from the banks of the Yamuna River, an architectural poem dedicated to a single emotion, the profound grief of Emperor Shah Jahan after the death of his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal. This is not just a building, it is the crystallized heartbreak of a man who commanded an empire, a Mughal emperor who poured his entire fortune and 20,000 workers over 22 years into creating a monument worthy of his lost love. An art historian specializing in the period describes it as a perfect fusion, where Persian, Islamic, and Indian architectural traditions were woven together to create something entirely new and eternal, a symbol of devotion that transcends its own materials. Yet this sublime beauty is shadowed by a deep and personal tragedy. After its completion, Shah Jahan was overthrown and imprisoned by his own son, Aurangzeb, held in a nearby fort where his only solace was a distant view of his wife's tomb until his own death. This layered history of absolute love, immense loss, and brutal betrayal has left a powerful, haunting energy. The spirit of Shah Jahan himself is said to wander the moonlit gardens, a spectral figure forever mourning his wife, his sorrow etched into the very air. Visitors, even those unaware of the full history, consistently report inexplicable experiences. Some are suddenly overcome with a wave of overwhelming, bittersweet emotion, a simultaneous feeling of deep love and profound loss that brings them to tears. Others, in the quiet moments before dawn, report hearing the soft, unmistakable sound of a man weeping, a mournful cry that seems to emanate from the walls themselves. This is not a haunting of fear, but of sorrow. The immense labor and the political intrigue of the Mughal Empire are the foundations of this place, but its true specter is the enduring power of grief. One tourist's photograph has become a compelling piece of modern evidence. He was capturing the intricate inlay work inside the main chamber, near the cenotaph of Mumtaz Mahal. The room was still and the light was low. When he reviewed his picture later, a single, brilliant orb of soft white light was hovering just above the false tomb, a luminous anomaly that had no source in the physical world. It simply hung in the air, a silent, glowing tribute. This forces us to ask a poignant question that redefines our entire understanding of hauntings. Can a place be haunted by love itself? Is the most powerful specter not one of anger or violence, but the pure, undiluted echo of a broken heart? The eternal mourning of the Taj Mahal, a monument to devotion, stands in stark contrast to our next destination, a factory of death where love was the first and final casualty. Rusted machinery stands frozen mid-action, skeletal conveyor belts draped with cobwebs as thick as velvet ropes. This is the heart of the Packington factory, a place where the very air feels charged with a volatile, unseen friction. Unlike the tragic histories of asylums or castles, this abandoned manufacturing plant in England is not haunted by a single, sorrowful event, but by something far more raw and modern, a violent and seemingly intelligent poltergeist. Its reputation among the urban exploration community is one of stark warning, a location known not for eerie whispers, but for physical assault. One paranormal investigator, after a harrowing overnight visit, described the activity as one of the most aggressive and relentless he had ever faced, a force that seemed to feed on the fear it created. The theories behind such intense phenomena are as layered as the factory's own grime. Some suggest the hauntings are tied to a much older, forgotten history of the land itself, a conflict or tragedy that long predates the brick and steel. Others point to the nature of the industrial past, a theory that the relentless, high-energy environment of mass production, with its roaring machines and concentrated human stress, created a perfect storm of negative psychic residue. This is not a gentle, residual echo, but an angry, interactive presence. The reports are consistently physical and terrifying. Heavy tools left undisturbed for years will suddenly fly from shelves as if hurled by an invisible hand. Explorers find that small personal items like keys or phones vanish without a trace, only to be discovered later in impossible locations, like the center of a vacant concrete floor. Most chilling are the accounts of visitors being physically marked, feeling the sharp, stinging scratch of unseen claws on their arms or backs. The very decay of the place seems to amplify the malevolence, with the scent of ozone and old grease hanging in the air like a poison. A particularly harrowing anecdote from a group of 4 explorers illustrates the collective nature of the terror. They were standing in the vast, open main hall, documenting the rusted presses, when without any warning, all 4 of them simultaneously felt the temperature plummet. The cold was not a gentle chill, but an intense, bone-deep freeze that seemed to suck the air from their lungs. In that same instant, each of them clearly heard a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the walls around them, a sound that vibrated in their chests. They did not speak, they simply ran, a unified flight from a presence that felt undeniably hostile and powerful. What raw, unfiltered emotion could possibly fuel such a violent and persistent haunting? Is it the pent-up rage of a forgotten industrial age, or something far more ancient and dark, awakened by the shuddering passage of machinery and now refusing to be silent again? From this modern crucible of poltergeist fury, our journey descends into the ultimate silence, a city swallowed whole by the sands of time. Sunlight streams through a broken window, illuminating a grand piano almost entirely submerged in fine, orange sand. This is the ghost town of Kolmanskap, where the opulent dreams of diamond prospectors have been slowly and meticulously buried by the Namib Desert. In the early 1900s, this was one of the richest communities on Earth, a bustling German colonial outpost where miners literally picked glittering gems from the sand. The wealth was so instantaneous and so immense that they built a town of startling grandeur in the middle of nowhere, complete with a ballroom, a casino, and the first X-ray station in the Southern Hemisphere. Fortunes were made overnight and champagne flowed as freely as water, but the diamonds were a finite treasure. As the easily accessible stones were gathered and richer deposits were found further south, the money and the people vanished, leaving their elegant Edwardian homes to the mercy of the dunes. A geologist who has studied the region explains that the desert here is a dynamic, living entity, with winds that constantly sculpt and move the sand, ensuring that no human structure, no matter how grand, can truly resist its advance. The hauntings of Kolmanskap are not of tragedy, but of a lavish lifestyle abruptly abandoned. Visitors threading their way through the sand-choked rooms of the old mansions often report the distant, ghostly sound of a waltz drifting from the buried concert hall. The apparition of a woman in an elegant white ball gown is sometimes seen gliding across the ballroom floor, a spectral hostess forever waiting for a party that will never begin. The most pervasive feeling is one of surreal opulence, of beautiful things being patiently and indifferently reclaimed by the earth. This town is a powerful case study in the 3 forces that define such places. The first is the brutal economics of resource extraction, where communities rise and fall with the market value of a single commodity. The second is the unstoppable process of environmental reclamation, where nature always has the final word. The third is the strange photographic fascination we have with such decay, a desire to capture beauty in the midst of oblivion. One photographer's experience perfectly captures the town's eerie mystery. He was exploring a largely intact home, his own footprints the only marks in the deep sand of the hallway. He entered a bedroom and stopped cold. There, clearly imprinted on the floor, was a set of small, bare footprints, the kind a child would make. They led from the center of the room directly to a blank wall, and there were no footprints leading back out. He was completely alone, and the fine, undisturbed sand in the hallway confirmed that no one else had entered that room for a very, very long time. What does it mean for a place to be so completely conquered not by war or plague, but by the simple, patient act of the wind? The silent, sandy grave of Kolmanskap brings our global journey to a close. These silent stones and sunken cities have offered us more than just ghost stories. They are a profound testament to the emotional residue of human existence, an archive written not on paper, but in the very atoms of these forsaken places. The true specters we have encountered are not apparitions in the night, but the enduring echoes of collective ambition, of profound tragedy, of love that outlasted death, and of the quiet dignity found in isolation. These locations are our most tangible connection to the past, forcing us to remember the lives that were lived, the dreams that were built, and the communities that were lost. Each crumbling wall and overgrown path is a plea from history, asking not to be feared but to be remembered. Our role in this ongoing story is one of guardianship. We must preserve these narratives through respectful exploration, through careful documentation, and most simply, through the act of telling their stories to one another. As the philosopher Georg Simmel once reflected, ruins show us that while nature can slowly reclaim what human hands have built, the human spirit that created them leaves an indelible mark upon the world. Look closely at the forgotten corners of your own world, the old factory on the edge of town, the deserted farmhouse down a country lane. Every place holds a story waiting to be rediscovered. Share your own encounters with these echoes of the past in the comments below. If you are drawn to the mysteries that linger in the silence, subscribe now for more journeys into the world's deepest and most compelling secrets. Together, we can ensure that the stories of these specters are never fully